Welcome to the third video in my series about Stationfall, the zany immersion game from Mateklund, published by Iron Games. And yes, I know it's a long way for you players till the end of this 7-video series. But no, because as soon as at the end of this third video, you'll be fully able to play the game. Videos 4, 5 and 6 are a gallery of all the characters and monsters, and video number 7 is about solo game and 2 or 3 player game. Up to now, after watching my first and second video, you are able to build a conspiracy of characters and to draw on their skills to reach your goals. Fine. But this game is not only about people helping or fighting each other. It's also about a spaceship, the station, the one that is falling to the earth. It is a complex ship full of equipment that can help you, but also with traps that can kill you. So, let's do together a guided tour of the station. And first, let me answer the question that's burning in your mind: how to escape the falling station. Please, no stress, everything's under control. There are 4 escape pods, 4 special cardboard tiles, plugged on the station and ready to carry survivors to the mesosphere. The mesosphere is this upper layer of Earth atmosphere that appears at the bottom of the game board. If a character takes place inside a pod and reaches the mesosphere, the game is over for him and he successfully escapes the station. At the end of the game, if your botanist, for example, is inside a pod in the mesosphere, you earn 2 victory points, and if he took his pet plant with him, you earn 2 more points. Okay, but how do you operate an escape pod? In most sections, you find a box with some special actions. These actions are linked to this section and can be performed by any character who stands in this section. Any character in the machine shop, for example, can repair any down robot for 1 action. In all 4 escape pods, there is the same 1 action, timed launch. So, if a character steps into a pod, he can use one of his actions for the turn to perform a timed launch. And what does it do? First, there is a prerequisite. It requires abandoned ship. In other words, the time launched is blocked by a safety mechanism. And this mechanism is only unlocked if an evacuation procedure is initiated. In the game, this is shown by this token on the top right of the map. At the beginning of the game, it is on its green side. All the pods are safely locked and no launch is possible. But if the evacuation procedure is initiated, the token is flipped to its red side and all pods are unlocked. This is called the abandoned ship status. So, a character inside a pod can do the time launch action only if this token is on its red side. We will see very soon how to flip it. And then it's easy. The botanist is inside the Houdini pod. The abandoned ship token is on its red side. Blue player activates the botanist who spends 1 action to do a timed launch. Blue player puts his blue timer token on the turn track on the next turn. It is turn 7. Blue player puts his timer token on turn 6. Every timer token on the turn track is resolved at the end of its turn in a 4th phase that follows the activation phase. This means that next turn, after activating a character as usual, blue player will resolve his timer marker by releasing the pod. The pod separates from the ship and immediately flies to the mesosphere with all its passengers. The botanist is saved. In other words, as its name suggests, timed launch is a way to launch a pod, but the operation lasts 1 full turn. And a lot of things can happen during this turn. And whatever happens, the pod leaves the ship when the turn marker reaches its timer token. The color of the timer token reminds what player did play it, so at the end of whose turn the launch will trigger. Hopefully there is a faster way to launch a pod. This is the section launch action, an action that is attached to the aft airlocks section. So, any character in the aft airlocks section can use this action to launch one of the 4 escape pods. Beware, again, there is that same prerequisite about abandoned ship. The prerequisite is written on each pod, but it means that no launch is possible without the abandoned ship status, whatever the specific launch action. So, the section launch must also comply with this prerequisite. And thus, if the abandoned ship token is on its red side and a character does the section launch action, any one pod, character's choice, is immediately launched to the mesosphere. No timer. Of course, you understand the problem. Because the section launch action is linked to the aft airlock section, that means that the character who triggers it is not inside any pod. So, if you want to actually flee with this action, you must step inside a pod and find another character kind enough to launch the pod you are in. Beware, escape pods are cramped, and as you see, only 3 characters can enter a pod. That means that a character cannot do the step action to enter a pod if there are already 3 characters inside. Also, if you choose the section launch action, there must be at least 1 character inside the pod. You cannot launch this way an empty pod. Note that this doesn't apply to timed launch. If a character goes inside a pod, triggers a timed launch with his timer, and then steps out of the pod will actually be launched empty next turn at the end of the timer. The third way to launch pods is the bridge launch. This action is attached to the bridge section far away at the other end of the station. Again, it works only if the abandoned ship token is on its red side. And look, this action can only be done by an officer. Officers are characters with this yellow capability on their character's card. There are 5 of them, 5 officers among the 27 characters in the game. So, if you are unlucky, there can be no officer at all on the ship for your game. And in such a case, this bridge launch action is not available. Okay, here the colonel is an officer who spends an action to do a bridge launch, and we suppose that the abandoned ship token is red. And the result is that all pods with someone inside are immediately launched to the mesosphere. In this example, 3 pods out of the 4 are launched with this single action. You cannot launch an empty pod this way. Fine, now you know how to get the hell out of here. You know, but you still have a problem. To launch a pod, whatever the action you use, you need the station to be on abandoned ship status. You need that someone did trigger the general evacuation alarm. And there is an action to do that. This is a bridge action, so only an officer can do it. The colonel, for example, in the bridge section, with his 2 actions for this turn, can first trigger the abandoned ship, the green token is flipped to its red side, and then he can do a bridge launch to release all the occupied pods. It seems easy, isn't it? Of course, if there is no officer on board, for example, things can become a lot more complex, but luckily there are other ways to trigger the abandoned ship status, and we will see them later. For the moment, keep in mind the easy way, an officer in the bridge, abandoned ship, bridge launch, and that's it. Note that once triggered, the abandoned ship status is permanent. The red token is never flipped back to its green side. Okay, so you know some good ways to escape the station. And the second key thing you need to know is how to find and handle items. Here is all we already know about items. But where can a character get these items? At the beginning of the game, some items are just scattered around the station, lying on the floor here and there. Characters just have to get to their section and pick them up into their inventory. Easy. Some characters even begin the game with items already in their inventory. Look, the colonel begins the game with already his own gun, you lucky devil. But these starting items are scarce and quickly all of them will belong to one character or another. And so, how to get more items? You can get more items with the manufacture action. Every item can be built, can be manufactured. You just have to find where. You can manufacture nanogel at the nanofactory. And you can manufacture helmets and bludgeons at the print shop thanks to some ultra-modern 3D printers. You can also manufacture guns, but only with an officer character. So, if the station chief is in the print shop, because she is an officer, for one action, she can manufacture a gun. The newly created item goes directly to the character's inventory, no need for any pickup action. You can thus manufacture any of the 4 basic items as often as you want. And in the Chem Lab, you can also manufacture firebombs. We will see very soon what this item is made for, but I think you can guess. Okay, now perhaps did you notice 3 special items that are on the map from the beginning of the game, but that cannot be manufactured? These items are unique. They are the briefcase, it contains the worst secrets of the megacorp that built and runs the station. The artifact, a strange alien item found somewhere deep in space. And the antimatter sample, a highly unstable compound ready to explode at any moment. These 3 items are non-active. They have no attached actions, so they are useless. But very precious to some characters. The Inspector, for example, earns a bonus of 4 victory points if they manage to escape to Earth with the briefcase and its secrets. Because they are regular items, characters can pick them up, keep them in their inventory, they can drop them, throw them, give them, or rob them. And if you look closely, you see that other things can be manufactured in the security station or in the biolab. These are data. Data are diamond-shaped tokens. There are 2 kinds, evidence and X-secret. Like items, they can be manufactured. In fact, data are not really manufactured, they are retrieved. Evidence is duplicated from the security station videotapes, and X-secret is copied from the biolab scientific documents. If a character does one of these manufacture actions, it creates a piece of that data on this character's card. This is not an item, so it doesn't take any space in the inventory. And because data is immaterial, it's a piece of information, a character can only own one of each, one evidence and one X-secret. X-secret is the easiest data to understand. First, some characters need to know this secret at their victory conditions. The Stranger, for example, earns 1 victory point just to know the secret, that is, to have the X-secret data token on their card. But on top of that, whenever a player activates a character who owns a copy of the X-secret, this player can peek at the Project X. What is the Project X? It's a terrible secret hidden deep in the Vault X. At the beginning of the game, a Project X card is randomly drawn from the 8 available. And this is, for the duration of this game, the dreadful secret that is hidden in the vault. In this example, I am red player and I activate the Stranger who belongs to my conspiracy. So, I can peek at the Project X card as soon as I activate the Stranger, because the Stranger owns the X-secret data. Note, in this example, because the Stranger belongs also to blue player's conspiracy, with a blue influence cube, blue player can also pick at the Project X card when he activates the Stranger. Okay, we will see later what harm the Project X can do. For now, we are just learning how data works. The second kind of data is evidence, and evidence is very important in this game because it has something to do with guilt. At the bottom left of the game map, there is a special box for players' guilt. Every player has his own guilt token in the innocent box at the beginning of the game, because at the beginning of the game, every player is innocent. Beware, guilt is linked to players, not characters. There is just one guilt token per player and not one per character. And so, what's the point with guilt? There are three possible status. You, as a player, can be innocent or suspect or guilty. And the only rule to know is very simple. If you are guilty, you cannot win the game. You don't even count your victory points. You are guilty, you lose. Even if you survive the Stationfall, you'll end up behind bars in jail. So, as you understand, it's very important to keep an eye on your guilt status. For now, you are innocent. How can it get worse? First, you go from innocent to suspect whenever a character under your command makes a human down in a lit section with cameras on. Let's take this sentence word by word. If you perform an action, that means if you do this action with any character you activate, any character from your conspiracy, or any character that you threaten with a compromat, or you bribe with your Bitcoin. This character doesn't have to match your secret identity. With this character, you make a human down. You attack him or steal his helmet in an unbreathable environment, or you set him on fire, or whatever. Note that you can attack a robot and make it down without becoming suspect. The law applies only to humans. In a lit section, some sections are unlit, black with this symbol. The locker room, for example, is unlit, so you can attack anyone in the locker room without becoming a suspect. If nobody can see your crime, you stay innocent. With cameras on means that your crime must be recorded. At the beginning of the game, onboard cameras are on, and this is shown by this green token. During the game, cameras can be shut off. We will see later how it can happen, but if cameras are off, anyone can attack anyone without becoming suspect, even in a lit section. Fine, and there is a second way to become suspect. Remember what we said in the second video. There is no righteous character in this game. Everyone has a compromat somewhere on the board, some compromising item or information. So, if you get a character's compromat, you can play it to make him perform one action for you. Okay, but sometimes you can own a compromat that matches a revealed player character, a character with an eye token on his card. Let's say, blue player revealed that he is the botanist. He showed his identity card and put his blue reveal token, his eye, on the botanist card. Nobody can have any influence cube on the botanist anymore, and so nobody but blue player can activate the botanist. But, as red player, it happens that I own the botanist compromat. That means that I know some compromising information about the botanist, blue player, that can convince him to perform one action for me. Okay, but because the botanist is a player, not a regular anonymous character, his owner, blue player, can decide whether or not he will perform the action I ask. So I declare what action I want. For example, let's suppose I ask the botanist to drop the helmet he owns, and then he decides if he obeys. If yes, if he drops his helmet, no problem, I discard his compromat and that's all. But if he refuses, then he doesn't drop his helmet, but I make my compromat public information, and blue player becomes suspect. A compromat is a compromising information. If it becomes public, its player becomes suspect. Okay, I understand, but what's the point? What's wrong with being suspect? I cannot win if I am guilty, but suspect is not guilty, isn't it? Yes, there's nothing wrong with being a suspect, but this is the first step to jail. And here is where the evidence data becomes important. In the middle of the station, there is a room, a section, called the array control. And in this room, there is one available action, transmit. So let's suppose that the Daredevil is in the array control section. I am red player, it's my turn. I can put an influence cube on the Daredevil and activate her right away. Then I can declare she makes the transmit action. Transmit means sending one data to Earth. There are two places where to send data, the news and the authorities. Both together are called the offsites. And so a character doing the transmit action can send one data to either the news or the authorities. Here the Daredevil can send her evidence data to the authorities. When you send the data, you don't lose it, you just copy it to its recipient. So now there is a copy of the evidence data at the authorities. And here we are. As soon as the evidence data reaches the authorities, all suspect players become guilty. All players except the transmitter who skillfully avoids exposing himself. Here, blue and purple players become guilty. Red player stays suspect only, he's the transmitter, the one who activated the Daredevil to do a transmit action. Orange player stays innocent. And this is very harsh because now blue and purple players cannot win the game anymore. Note that red player should worry because if blue player activates the Daredevil again, he can make her transmit again and red player becomes guilty also. Okay, you understand now why it's better not to be a suspect at all, to avoid the risk of becoming guilty. Now, if you are guilty, what can you do? Of course, there's still a solution, and this is to go back to Earth and meet the authorities with your lawyer to negotiate your freedom. So, you need to escape the station back to Earth, of course, but you need also to own the evidence data. So, for example here, if blue player's secret identity is the colonel and he manages to escape to Earth with the evidence data, at the end of the game, he downgrades his guilt status from guilty to suspect and then he can earn victory points. Okay, now how do you handle this precious data, X-secret and evidence? Data are created with the manufacture action, in the biolab for X-secret and in the security station for evidence. Data is not an item, it cannot be dropped or thrown or picked up. A data token is always on a character's card, never on the map. But once manufactured, a data token can be copied to another character. This is the copy action, and it works for data just like the give action works for items. And as its name suggests, when you copy a piece of data, you duplicate it. At the beginning of the action, there is one data token. After the copy, there are two. And you can even copy data to a down character. Note that just like items, you can give data with the copy action, but you cannot take. You cannot unless you have a weapon, and this is the rob action. Just like for items, a character with a weapon can copy a piece of data from another character in the same section. With a gun, the colonel can rob the evidence from the Daredevil. Okay, now let's suppose that I am the Daredevil. And because I've done some bad things before as red player, I am suspect. And so I know that someone with a gun can come into my section, rob me of my evidence data and transmit it to the authorities, making me guilty and preventing me from winning the game. This evidence data I own is useless for me, and on the opposite, it is a danger if someone robs it from me. Luckily, as an action, I can simply delete it. The piece of data disappears from my character card, and that's it, no more evidence. But you can only use this delete action on your own revealed character. You cannot just activate some character from your conspiracy and ask him to delete his data. And so if you are suspect, what can you do against the threat of a character with an evidence data? Look, there is another way to delete data. During the resolve phase, that is the fourth phase of every turn, every data from any character in the physics lab are deleted. This is because of heavy magnetic fields in the lab. So, if he wants to avoid any problem, red player can activate the medical robot and move it to the physics lab. At the end of his turn, all data on the robot card are deleted. And now, before going on, as you know the role of guilt and evidence in victory conditions, perhaps is it time to sum up the endgame and how the winner is determined. Easy. All the endgame procedure can be read here at the top of the game board. As you can see on the turn track, the number of turns in a game depends on the number of players. For a 5-player game, the duration is 12 turns. Fine, so you can guess that each player will play 12 times until the end of the game. Not exactly. Because there's something special with the last box, turn 0. Turn 0 is the moment when the station enters the atmosphere. The moment when the station will explode for sure. But it can take up to 1 more minute, nobody knows. At the beginning of the game, a secret token is drawn randomly among 3 and put in this box number 0. And after 12 turns, when the turn marker enters box 0, this token is flipped. If it's a fireball 2 chances out of 3, the station explodes and the game is over. Otherwise, 1 chance out of 3, the station's doom lasts 1 more minute and players play this turn 0 to the end. And thanks to this possibility, during the game, no one can ever be sure how many rounds remain to be played. And no one can build some perfect mathematical plan 100% sure of victory. There's always hope in the world of Stationfall. Okay, and when it's over, when the station at last explodes in the atmosphere, players follow the endgame procedure. First, each player reveals their secret identity if they haven't already. Second, this is the moment when every player whose main character did escape to Earth can deliver the data he owns to either the authorities or the news or both. Note that this is possible even if the character is down. A down character who escapes to Earth is healed on Earth and is not considered as down anymore. Note also that only revealed player characters can deliver their data. After Stationfall, it's no longer time to activate other characters from your conspiracy. And so, this is at this time that you can deliver evidence data to the authorities to go back from guilty status to suspect. And then, it's time for scoring. Each player counts his victory points for his main and his bonus characters, with special bonuses for bitcoins and a penalty if he used more influence cubes than allowed. We already saw all this in previous videos. And don't forget that if a player is still guilty at this point, he doesn't count victory points at all and he loses the game. Okay, I know that the beginning of this video was a lot to swallow, but now I swear we are done with complex rules. What remains from now on is a catalog of Chrome, a long list of all these funny little things that makes this game so epic. So brace yourself and go on. You remember this example. Blue and red player are both suspect. The Daredevil is in the array control section. She belongs to both players' conspiracy and she owns an evidence data that can make both of them guilty. What a dangerous situation. It's red player's turn. He activates the Daredevil. And with the transmit action from the array control section, she copies her evidence data to the Earth authorities. Blue player immediately becomes guilty, but not a red player because he's the one who transmitted the data. Fine, but as we already noticed, as soon as it is blue player's turn, he can do the same, transmit the same data again, and this time red player won't avoid becoming guilty. So, what can he do? With his second action, the Daredevil can sabotage the array control section. Sabotage is a basic action that anyone can do. Anyone with a weapon, a gun or a bludgeon. It's like an attack but against a section. With a bludgeon, the Daredevil destroys all the array control equipment. A damage token is put on the section and that means its special action cannot be used anymore. And so, even if blue player activates the Daredevil, he won't be able to transmit the data and make red player guilty. Every section can be sabotaged. A damage pod, for example, cannot be launched. And this one is funny. If a pod is timed launched and is damaged before the end of the timer, it explodes when the timer ends with all its occupants. Let's suppose that the colonel under red player's activation performs a time launched and then sabotages the pod. At the end of his next turn, if nobody does anything about it, being damaged, the pod is destroyed at launch. And all characters inside are annihilated. Not just down, but annihilated. An annihilated character is out of the game and cannot be revived. Still, such a character can earn victory points at the end of the game. The colonel can still earn 2 victory points if the Project X is released. And wait, there's an even more efficient way to destroy things, the firebomb. The Astro Chimp is in the rec room and is a little worried because he is suspect and the colonel is about to retrieve evidence data from the security station. No problem, the chimpanzee has a firebomb. Where does he get it? Firebombs can be manufactured from the chem lab. As an action, the chimpanzee can throw his bomb into the security station. Like any other item, he can just throw it at the colonel's feet, but in the case of a firebomb, he can declare that he ignites the bomb before throwing it. And then the bomb explodes in the security station and immediately damages this section. At least, the colonel and anyone else will be unable to manufacture evidence data anymore. But better than that, when a firebomb explodes, it sets the section on fire. And then, because the colonel has no protection, he is down. Okay, let's take a little time to understand what just happened. Fire is a hazard. Hazards are triangular tokens. There are 2 of them, fire and asphyxiation. So, fire we know. There is only one way to set a section on fire, that is to use a firebomb. You can declare that your bomb detonates when you drop it or you throw it, and then of course the bomb itself is destroyed and it immediately damages the section where it explodes. And also a fire hazard triangular token is put on the section. And it will stay there. A fire never goes out by itself. If nobody tries to put it out, it lasts forever. And any human in the same section as a fire hazard is immediately down. That means that a robot is safe in the fire. Only human becomes down. But a spacesuit can be used as a fireproof suit. So, any human with a helmet item can stay with the fire hazard without becoming down. So in our previous example, when the chimpanzee throws his firebomb, first it damages the security station section. There's nothing to do to avoid that. Then it sets it on fire. A fire hazard token is put on the map. And then, as a consequence, because the colonel is a human and he doesn't wear a helmet, he is down. And note that from now on, the chimpanzee cannot step into the security station anymore, because by doing so, he would immediately become down, and a character cannot do an action that would immediately put him down. Only robots and humans with a helmet can move into the burning security station. Asphyxiation hazard works pretty like fire hazard. At start, two sections begin with the asphyxiation hazard, the outer space and the magnetic containment. Outer space is obvious. There is no oxygen in outer space. Asphyxiation hazard here is permanent. And like with fire, any human without a helmet is instantly down if in a section with an asphyxiation hazard. In other words, only robots and humans with a helmet can leave the station to outer space. So, what can you do if, for example, someone threw a firebomb and created a fire hazard that blocks your path? There is a way to put out the fire. Even better, the station is equipped with a top-notch firefighting system, and to operate it, you just need access to a console. There are two consoles in the station, one in the security station and the other in the mainframe. These are the sections with the console action. By moving to the security station, the AstroChimp can do a console action, and this action is multiple choice. There is at the bottom right of the map a list of what choices you have. First choice, you can activate jammers. You can turn them on or off. More on that in a few moments. For now, we are more interested in the second choice, hazard suppression. Anywhere in the station, because with the console you monitor the entire firefighting system, you can remove an asphyxiation hazard or you can turn a fire hazard into an asphyxiation hazard. And so, if you want to remove all hazards from a burning section, you need two console actions. The first one to turn the fire into asphyxiation, the smoke that fills the room after the fire, and the second console action to remove asphyxiation. Fine. So, with one action left after his move, our chimpanzee can only turn the fire into asphyxiation. He won't be able yet to cross the aft tub without a helmet. But still, this is the first step. Note that fire needs oxygen, so there can be no fire in a section with an asphyxiation hazard. If you throw a firebomb into a section with already an asphyxiation hazard, you damage it, but you don't set it on fire. Note that once a section is damaged, it loses all its attached actions, and there is no way to repair it. A damaged section stays damaged until the end of the game. If you damage the security station, nobody will be able again to retrieve evidence data, for example, and thus damaging sections is a very powerful tool. Still, because in Stationfall there is always hope, some characters can repair damaged sections. But there are only 4 out of 27. We will see them in our following videos. And so, damaging sections remains a very powerful tool. Okay, back to console action. With this action, you can remove a fire or an asphyxiation hazard, fine. But you can also monitor the jammers. What are these jammers? If you remember not long ago, we talked about data and the action of copying data. To copy a piece of data from a character to another, both characters need to share the same section. And you should ask why so far in the future can't people send each other data on their cell phones? Why do they need to be in the same room? That's because of jammers. At the beginning of the game, the station jammers are on. personal communications are jammed. And you can only copy data from one character to another if they can plug their smartphones, both in the same room. But with a console action, you can turn jammers off, and then any character can copy data to any other character wherever on the map. Beware, even with jammers off, data cannot be sent to Mesosphere. If a character already escaped in a pod, for example, it's too late to send him some data. And on the opposite, jammers, even on, are ineffective against array control transmission. Whether jammers are on or off, a character in the array control can always transmit data to the news or the authorities. That being said, think about it and consider how powerful it can be. By deactivating the jammers, all data can easily and very quickly spread throughout the station. Cameras are very close to jammers. They can be on or off. They are on at the beginning of the game, and remember, they record everything that happens in the station. You can become suspect only because cameras are recording. Without any camera, you'd have no fear of becoming guilty. Thus, any character can shut the cameras off. But this is not a console action like with jammers. There is a dedicated action to shut off and turn on cameras. And this action is only possible from the security station. And that's it. If you want to beat other humans down without becoming suspect, you just have to shut cameras off, and nowhere in the station will your crimes or any crimes by anyone be recorded. Now let's talk about movement inside and around the station. We already know about vents. There are 7 such vents in the station and no movement is allowed through these vents, but for 3 characters who can, thanks to their tunnel rat ability. These 3 characters can freely move through vents, but they still cannot throw items through vents. Nobody can throw items through vents. Also, at the beginning of the game, 2 passageways are locked. The one that leads to the Vault X, where Project X is kept safe, and the one that leads to the magnetic containment, which holds the very unstable antimatter sample. No one can use these locked passageways. No one can open these locks. No one except the officers. Thanks to biometrics, these locks open for officers, and this works even if the officer is down. If the medical robot drags the down colonel, the lock opens and they both can enter the magnetic containment. And once opened, a lock stays open until the end of the game. The lock token is just removed. Note that as soon as the abandoned ship status is triggered, all locks automatically open. And then there is outer space. Outer space is this box on top of the map. It is dark, unlit, it is vacuum. There is a permanent asphyxiation hazard on it that cannot be removed. And so, robots can freely go to outer space, but humans must wear a helmet. In fact, this box represents the empty space all around the station, not only on top of it. Every time a character leaves the station, other than in an escape pod, he goes to the outer space box. There are 4 sections that open to outer space: forward and aft airlocks, and forward and aft exhaust. They all allow the airlock action. This action is like a regular step action, but to move from the section to outer space. And there is the same airlock action in the outer space section. That means that a character in the outer space can use it to move to one of the 2 airlock sections, aft or forward. These possible movements are shown by the green arrows. When the arrow is both ways, a character can move from the section to the outer space, but also back from outer space to either section. When the arrow is single way, the character can use this section to leave the station to outer space, but he cannot enter the station there from outer space. For example, a character, a robot who can face the vacuum without a helmet, in the aft exhaust, with these two actions for the turn, can 1. Move with an airlock action to the outer space, all exits leads to that same outer space box, and then, second action, he moves with the outer space airlock action to the forward airlock section. As you see, outer space can be used as a shortcut to go from one end of the station to the other. The airlock action is in fact very powerful. You can use it as a step action to move from or to outer space, and like a step action, you can drag a down character with you as you move. Better than that, you can use it to eject a down character. The Daredevil in the forward airlocks can eject the down medical robot to outer space using the airlock action. But this doesn't work the other way. You cannot eject a down character from outer space into the station. And you can do the same with an item. This means using the airlock action like a throw action. The Daredevil can use an airlock action to throw the alien artifact she owns to outer space, and this works both ways as long as the green arrows allow it. Note that there is still a big difference between the airlock action and the step action. The step action is a basic action that any character can do anytime, while the airlock action is a section action attached to a specific section. If the forward airlock section is damaged, its airlock action is no longer available and the Daredevil cannot move out of the station anymore. Fine, and now let's talk about power. As you guess, power supply in a falling station can be a decisive factor. Power in the station is provided by three core sections: the reactor, the mainframe, and the fuel cells. They all bear a lightning bolt symbol. And as long as they all work as intended, there is no problem in the station. Things start to get tricky when these sections become damaged. There is a power status track at the top of the map, with a power token showing at start that no power sections are damaged. As soon as a power section is damaged, the token is increased and penalties are applied for lack of energy, with worse penalties when two power sections are damaged. Up to you if you can to repair these damaged sections to restore power and lessen the penalties. Okay, and so what are these penalties? If one power section is damaged, all cameras shut off and all jammers shut off. That means that out of cameras you can commit any crime without becoming suspect, and without jammers you can copy your data to any character anywhere in the station. Then, if a second power section is damaged, things get worse. Of course, you keep the previous penalties, cameras and jammers are still off. But on top of that, all sections become unlit. And no section action is available anymore, so all actions that are written on the map, it becomes impossible to transmit data to the Earth or to manufacture any item, for example. Fortunately, safety functions are maintained even without power, so all timed launch actions and airlock actions are still available. You can always flee to outer space or to mesosphere with pods. When 2 or 3 power sections are damaged, the blackout also triggers the abandoned ship status. All escape pods become launchable. Also, all locks become manual. That means that locked passageways stay locked, but their biometric system doesn't work anymore. So any character in a section adjacent to the locked passageway can spend one action to manually remove the lock. And after that, anyone is free to step through this passageway. Officers have no privilege any longer regarding locks. They can open them, but like any other character can. And finally, such a lack of power immediately releases the dreadful Project X. The secret Project X card is revealed and its effect applies immediately. And now it's time for Antimatter. Don't ask me why there is this so unstable and dangerous antimatter sample inside the station. It's one of these crooked projects from the mega corporation that built the station. The antimatter sample is an item, and everyone knows that antimatter is a very dangerous compound. So, from the beginning of the game, this item is kept in the magnetic containment section. First, this special section is locked. The room is a dead end and only officers are able to open its door. Moreover, the room is filled with a special gas that makes the air unbreathable. Robots are not affected by asphyxiation hazard, so a robot could safely enter the room if it finds a way to unlock the door. But because robots are mainly the products of the mega corporation industry itself, doing so would be a terrible betrayal. That's why any robot that ends its turn in this room sees all the influence cubes on its card go to the betrayal box. So all in all, this is not an easy room to enter, and the antimatter sample is not an easy item to retrieve. Usually, and all is done for that, this antimatter sample is inactive. It becomes dangerous when it is flipped to its red armed side. When the antimatter is armed, it explodes 4 minutes later, so 4 turns later, and destroys all matter around it. As soon as it is armed, a timer token is put 4 turns later. This shows the moment the antimatter will explode. The timer token color is that of the player who flipped the antimatter. There are 3 ways to arm the antimatter. First, an officer at the bridge can trigger the self-destruct action. Because it is a bridge action, only officers can do it. And the effect of this self-destruct action is not to destruct this station right away, but instead, the antimatter token is flipped over. So, a timer token is put on the turn track 4 turns later, and the antimatter sample explodes when the timer token is reached. The second way to arm the antimatter sample is to eject it. There is an action attached to the magnetic containment section, eject antimatter. So, a character who entered this section can use this action and eject the antimatter sample to outer space. Doing so, the antimatter item is flipped and a timer token is put 4 turns later when the antimatter will explode, probably in outer space, if nobody changed its location in the meantime. Note that after turn 4, it is useless to arm the antimatter because it would explode after the Stationfall, after the end of the game. Turn 3, in fact, because there's 1 chance out of 3 that the game lasts 1 more turn. And the last way to arm the antimatter is just to take it out of its magnetic containment. If a character just enters the room, free picks up the antimatter and then steps out, it automatically arms the antimatter that will explode 4 turns later. When the antimatter sample is armed on its red side, there is absolutely no way to flip it back to its unarmed side. Fine, and so what happens when it finally explodes? In fact, it depends on where it explodes. If the antimatter explodes somewhere inside the station, the whole station is destroyed, and we go straight to the end of the game. Thus, one can say that the antimatter is mainly a way to shorten the game. If the antimatter explodes in outer space, it destroys anything and anyone that is in the outer space box. But also, it damages any section in the station that is open to outer space. That is, both airlocks and both exhausts. All sections with green arrows. And if you think about it, that means that no one is able to get out the station anymore. If there's no character with repair capabilities, it could be the end of many hopes. If the antimatter explodes inside an escape pod, that is in a pod already detached from the station, in the mesosphere, then everything and everyone inside this particular pod is destroyed. And finally, less frequently, the antimatter can explode in the mesosphere but out of any pod. This is the case, for example, when a character escapes with the Daredevil's rocket wings. In this case, only the character that is carrying the antimatter is annihilated with all his inventory. Also, you have to know that as soon as the antimatter is armed, so 4 turns before it actually explodes, it triggers the abandoned ship status. That means that as soon as the timer is set, all escape pods are unlocked and ready for use. Okay, the following fatal danger is contamination. And for real, contamination is not so dangerous. It's just another unethical experiment that has taken hold in the station. Some kind of half biological, half electronic virus fills the air of the biolab. And thus, every time a character enters this section, it gets a contamination token in his inventory. If, for example, the counselor steps into the biolab, he gets 1 contamination token. And the only effect is that this token occupies 1 box in the character's inventory. And this happens even if the character immediately steps out of the lab. As soon as he enters, he gets contaminated. It is impossible to go through the biolab without being contaminated. And the virus can infect robots as well as humans. Hopefully, a character cannot be contaminated twice. If he already has a contamination token in his inventory, he doesn't get another one. Never more than 1 such token per character. A contaminated character doesn't contaminate others. The only way to be contaminated is to go through the biolab. If the biolab is on fire, there is no contamination anymore, unless the fire is extinguished and the contamination resumes. There is a special room, the tanks, where you can decontaminate a character. This is an action, decontaminate, that eliminates a contamination token from a character's inventory. Note that a character can do this action to decontaminate himself or another character in the tanks. And that's all for contamination. This may seem like an anecdotal inconvenience, but for some characters it counts as a victory condition. For example, the microbiologist, mother of the virus, tries to bring back her virus to Earth by infecting as many characters as possible. And finally, the topic you are dying to know about, the Project X. Project X is another infamous idea that the megacorporation hid deep inside its station. It is a secret card, randomly drawn among 8 at the beginning of the game, and it corresponds to a secret experiment that is hidden in the Vault X. And the first thing you can try to do is to know the secret. This is a data that can be retrieved with the manufacture action in the biolab, that same biolab that makes you contaminated with the virus. And as a standard piece of data, characters can copy it or even rob it or transmit it to Earth, to the news or to the authorities. And every time a player activates a character who owns the X secret data, this player can peek at the Project X card. In this example, if just after that a blue player also activates the botanist, blue player also can peek at Project X. Okay, but even if the X secret spreads through the station and through the players, the Project X by itself is still locked inside the Vault X. Indeed, there is a lock on the only passageway that leads to Vault X, a lock that only officers can open. There's also a vent from the biolab that can allow small and agile characters to crawl into the vault. The Project X by itself is still enclosed and secured inside the Vault X. To release the Project X, your character has to damage the vault. And this is the first way to release the Project X. You enter the vault and you destroy its security systems. But there are 2 other ways to release it. First, there is a secured command that an officer and only an officer can activate from the adjacent cryolab. And the same command can be activated remotely from the bridge. Note that the release of Project X automatically triggers the abandoned ship status. And as you know, this unlocks all locked doors in the station. So even if you release Project X remotely from the bridge that seems out of range, the Vault X door unlocks and frees whatever monstrous thing is hiding inside. And the third way to release Project X is by shutting down the station's power. We already saw that. No power, no more security to keep Project X buried deep inside its vault. And thus, when it is released, the Project X card is flipped and whatever is written on it happens. We will see in video number 6 all the possible Project X that you can meet and how they work. Now you know a lot about the Doom Station and all its rooms and corridors. But before parting, I'd like to summarize the abandoned ship status and all the different ways to trigger it. As you remember, the abandoned ship status is only useful for one thing: it unlocks the escape pods. Without the abandoned ship token on its red side, no way to launch any pod. And first, there is a special action at the bridge to trigger this status. As every bridge action, this one is only available to officers. Also, we saw that any danger alarm triggers automatically the abandoned ship status. If there is a power blackout, or if the antimatter sample is armed, or if the Project X is released. And finally, at the beginning of turn 1, the station security systems finally understand that the whole station is falling to the earth and will burn in 1 minute. That's why, if nothing special is done, the abandoned ship status is automatically triggered at the beginning of turn 1. And now some last few oddities that I must teach you to end my guided tour of the station. First, the therapy garden. This section provides a special action, Meditate. This action is only available to revealed player characters, that is, characters with the player's eye token. For one action, this player can take all his influence cubes back from the betrayal box. This is the only way to get these cubes back. And this completes the influence cubes diagram we started in video number 2. In the machine shop, everyone with no special tools can repair a down robot, just like the revive action but only for a robot and without nanogel. The reactor cannot be damaged with a bludgeon, so only a gun or a firebomb can damage it. And finally, if the fuel cells are damaged, this immediately creates a fire hazard in the nearby tanks. Like with a firebomb, the fire damages the section, so the tanks also become damaged. And finally, note that pink and green colored sections are zero gravity. They are close to the station axis and don't beneficiate from the rotation-induced pseudo-gravity. Zero gravity sections have no special rules, but some characters get special abilities in these environments. And voila! After these 3 first videos, you know all the rules you need to play the game. You can sit at your game table as soon as now and play Stationfall right away. And right now, as I speak, all the panels I drew during these videos are available as downloadable files on the Board Game Geek page dedicated to Stationfall. And that's perfect. With all that you can play, but as you will see, every single character in the game adds his own little special rules. And that's why I propose you watch my following 3 videos, number 4, 5 and 6, that will present the gallery of all the 27 characters in the game. In the 6th video you'll find also the rules pertaining to the 8 possible Project X. The 7th and last video will be about setup and all the special game configuration, solo, 2-player, 3-player and team variant. Allez, salut les amis et à bientôt chez Jean-Michel Grosjeu.